Frank Lucas is also in the news this week. ONR's Ed Murray sat down with the Oklahoma congressman and others to discuss the potential of a new space race, this time with China.
We had a Sputnik moment earlier this year, but because of all the focus on the president and trade wars and impeachment and all those investigations, we didn't notice.
A Sputnik moment. The original came in October 1957, when the Soviet Union beat the U.S. into space with the successful orbit of a satellite.
Sputnik was the moment that drove the space race forward. I would suggest to you part of what frightened the government in 1957 was not only the ability to do all those things, but the Russians had developed a rocket big enough to put such a payload up there. If they could do that, then that meant they could throw a hydrogen bomb over the North Pole into the United States.
Lucas, the ranking member of the U.S. House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, says today's Sputnik moment, China putting a lander and rover on the lunar surface.
You say, why is that so significant? Well, the Chinese were able to develop a successful rocket with enough capacity and power to get it there. They were able to develop a lander and the technology to land it without crashing. Ask the Israelis, ask the Italians, some others. That's kind of a complicated process.
But what truly concerns Lucas, China is the first to explore the never visible from Earth far side of the moon.
They had to put a series of communication satellites in orbit around the moon to communicate with the rover on the ground. Those communication satellites had to be able then to communicate with a series of Chinese land-based reception centers around the entire planet. Putting all those pieces together represents a dramatic move technologically forward, using the profits from doing business with us in the unfair trade situation we're in.
The U.S. currently plans to return to the moon itself in 5 years, meaning new innovations in science and technology. Congresswoman Kendra Horn joins Lucas on the House Science Committee.
We're looking forward to going back to the moon, Mars, and beyond, and what that means for us, while making sure that we're also investing in our science and our robotic exploration. You know, in addition to the moon and the Mars programs, we're making sure that we're building policy that is smart and sustainable, because these aren't partisan issues. These are issues that impact all of us.
And the impact could be tremendous for Oklahoma's aerospace industry, which already has a $44 billion annual impact on the economy. Its leaders gathered this week in Oklahoma City.
You know, when you look at government contracting, you look at development of relationships. We've grown our business through relationships, but we also have to perform. NASA is going to need the same support. They're going to compete contract opportunities. Our companies here, if we work together, can compete for those contracts.
Phil Busey Sr. is CEO of Oklahoma-based DRG, a defense contractor. He says another strong point for the state, our great airspace for training.
And that's always been something that's attracted people to look at western Oklahoma in Clinton for facilities for space development, because we have great airspace. And we've got the ability to support that if we work together.
3, 2, engine sequence start. 1, 0, launch commit. We have a liftoff.
That first space race ended well in 1975, when Weatherford astronaut General Tom Stafford docked his Apollo craft with the Soviet Soyuz.
Moscow is go for docking. Houston is go for docking. It's up to you guys. Have fun.
Alrighty, sounds good.
The handshake in space led to cooperation between the two superpowers that still exist today aboard the International Space Station.
We can demonstrate to the world that two countries with different languages, different units of measurements, and certainly vastly different political systems could work together for a common goal.
But PBS NewsHour science correspondent Miles O'Brien believes any battle for space supremacy with China will need a unified political drive, something we haven't seen for a while.
George W. Bush retired the space shuttle, said, let's go to the moon. President Obama came in and said, no, we're not going to the moon. We've been there, done that. Let's go to Mars. Donald Trump comes in and says, let's go to the moon. Well, guess what? If you do that every election cycle, you end up going nowhere.
China will attempt to grow food in a terrarium on this mission with the goal of a lunar outpost around 2030.
I don't want a totalitarian society to colonize and develop the moon and then be able to move on to Mars and leave the rest of us, the democracies, behind in the dust.
Beijing has plans for 4 more robotics missions, the next as early as December. Ed Murray, the Oklahoma News Report.
NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine says it will take an additional $20 to $30 billion to get an astronaut or astronauts back to the moon by 2024.